All right, welcome back. And of course, we are live on X Spaces, on Facebook, on YouTube, and of course, on myjoyonline.com. Your comments are welcome via our social media handles, and we'll share with the rest of the world. Now, this afternoon, the race to avoid a national power shutdown is on as the Energy Minister, John Jinapop, scrambles to find billions of cedis to purchase liquid fuel to power electricity generating plants. Now, the Energy Minister told members of Parliament on the Energy Committee that the country currently has less than 3 days of liquid fuel in stock. Now, while some more fuel has been ordered, funds are not available as we speak now to pay for this. Now, the minister is expected to make desperate last-minute ditch effort at Cabinet to secure the necessary funds to make these payments. We can listen to him in his briefing with members of the Energy Committee of Parliament.
Thank you, Chairman. Today, as I sit here, this morning, my headache is how to get the next parcel of liquid fuel. The fuel we have to take us 2.6 days. We've placed order for fuel, but it has to be paid. We've procured some fuel on credit and working with the Ministry of Finance to pay. But the truth is that the Ministry of Finance also has its limits. And so we'll be going to Cabinet to discuss how we can improve on the sector. And that is why we are pushing for some private sector participation in ECG's operations. It does not entirely solve the problem, but it takes us to another level. Because if the collections are reduced from the 40% to say 5%, it means that we'll be collecting more. Cabinet has also adopted a position, and we'll brief you, Chairman. All MMDAs are supposed to pay for their electricity bills. They have to budget for it. We've identified what we call critical institutions. They include the health sector, the education sector, the security agencies, and the presidency. Even with that, so if you take the health sector, is the theaters, the laboratories, the wards that will be exempted. If you take the educational institutions, dormitories are not part, restaurants are not part, only lecture theaters. And so we've classified that, and Cabinet is granting the approval, and will publish that. Even what we term as critical institutions, the Minister of Finance will have to budget for it and pay.
Right, so the question is about what the ministry is doing to, get the necessary funds to purchase the fuel. And of course, we can listen to the minister again on steps being taken to address this challenge.
This year alone, government spent over 24 billion cedis in energy sector, either you call it subsidies, under recoveries, or shortfalls. This year, it is estimated at over 30 billion in terms of the shortfall. Yesterday, we had a session with the finance minister, and a lot of the people here were there. We require about $1.1 billion to procure liquid fuels alone. Unfortunately, and the PRC is here, the liquid fuel is not part of the tariff structure. And so you will be buying close to $15 billion of liquid fuel, and that has to be paid by the central government because it's not part of the tariff structure. As if that is not enough, what you call the reserve margin, which is a necessity, because you just don't bring plants to meet exactly what you consume. What if one plant goes off for maintenance or any situation? That is not also part of the tariff structure. More importantly, the tariff itself, ECG, is unable to collect all the monies. And so you're having a deficit of about 2 billion cedis every month when it comes to ECG's collections. When you add that deficit and you add the fuel, which is not part of the pass-through, you are looking at over 30 billion. Car Power has just sent us a letter that by 18th, they will shut down the plant because we owe them more than $400 million. IPPs alone, we owe them $1.7 billion. And so it's serious.
Indeed, it is very serious, and that is why we want to find answers to the concerns of the minister and, of course, the concerns of the energy sector. The thing is that if funds are not released immediately, we'll run out of fuel that we are using to power our plans. And that means that by the end of the weekend, we are likely to have energy crisis in this country. Now, parliamentary correspondent Kwakwa Santo will join me shortly. But before we do that, let me bring in Mr. Ishmael Ajekum-Hene, former Public Utility Regulatory Commission board member, and of course with the Kumasi Institute of Technology and Environment. Mr. Ajekum-Hene, good afternoon. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon.
So good to have you. And in fact, the picture the energy minister is painting is quite scary. What I want to find out is what really is the issue with the energy sector that every day we hear new figures of debt. What is the problem as you see it?
Okay, so I mean, I've listened to the minister, and I am not too sure about all the things that he's talking about, especially when the amount of money he's quoting as the money required to procure liquid fuels. And I'm also a little bit surprised that the minister is saying that the cost of buying the fuel is not part of the tariffs. I'm not too sure whether that is entirely accurate, but I will come back to that.
Right.
The problem is this. You know, when you produce electricity, there are various cost centers, and that ultimately goes in to determine the tariff that end users are supposed to pay. The PURC, when they are setting their tariffs, they allow for what they call regulatory losses, which for some time now is hovering around 21%. And then they cost everything, and they say that we expect the distribution utilities, who are the off-takers of the power that the IPPs are producing, to collect minimum 98% of the energy or electricity that they will procure and bill and sell, 98%. So it's only 2% that is allowed as non-collectible. So if you are unable to collect all that 98%, it means that tariff is not covering that. But what tariff is covering includes the fuel. The only problem here is that if you look at the energy outlook that was prepared by the Energy Commission, and that report is on the Energy Commission's website, so you can always check. The projected cost of procuring fuel for 2025 is around 1.2 billion US dollars. But the bulk of that, about 97% of that, is supposed to come from natural gas. Okay. So I believe what the minister is saying and what he's saying is not being covered by the tariffs is the fact that everything has been, the projection is that we're going to use gas. Predominantly for a very long time, gas has been the favored fuel because it's cheaper than crude. I believe what he's talking about is the fact that they would have used natural gas to price, but we're required to get some liquid fuels.
Right.
There's always a price differential, but that's why the PURC do quarterly adjustments. In the next window, they take all of these things into consideration, including whether or not more hydro than projected was generated or not. So it's not entirely true. But the problem that we have is that for a very long time, we are unable to account for all the power that ECG, for example, will procure. It's the same with NETCO.
Right.
So whenever that happens, it means that you are not in a position to be able to go and pay for the fuel, that the invoices that are given to you. And the problem is further complicated when, as we know, the Atuabo plant is having a challenge because whereas in that instance, we get to use the fuel on credit and sometimes not even pay for it. That's how come GMP, Ghana Gas, is being owed a lot of money. But when it comes to liquid fuel, nobody is selling it to you on credit. So anytime we have a gas shortage problem, then government needs to find money because ECG doesn't have the money, or neither does any of the power producers. So that's the problem that we have. Not only are we having losses, but we are also not able to collect enough to be able to pay for all the costs. But the amount of money that I believe the minister is quoting, maybe they need to check the numbers again because it's way, way, way above what has been estimated in the 2025 energy outlook. But there is a problem. And everybody knew that there's always a problem. And if the minister is telling us today that we have only two and a half days of liquid fuel supply, I mean, I would accept that when he first came in and there was a looming crisis, but everybody had known that we need to get some stock. So it's not enough to say that we have only 2.5 days, because at least it's been there for more than a month.
Right.
And it's long enough for him to be able to arrange for fuel to come in.
But my difficulty, in fact, and I raised this matter some few hours ago about the minister. Even during President Mohammed's swearing in, he gave us the same warning that we were left with 2 days of fuel. Today, 15th of May, he's giving us the same thing. And it looks like every opportunity he gets.
You see, that's precisely the problem. And it's because he's faced with the reality. The problem is that you need cash. A cargo of crude oil is about $50 million. And one cargo of crude oil is about $50 million.
Right.
And nobody's selling it to you on credit. You need cash. We all know that the economy is stretched. But you see, if ECG were able to collect all the monies that the power they sell, I mean, there's another issue that has to do with what he talked about as reserve margin. For a very long time, when the Honorable Minister was in opposition, he kept saying that there's never been any excess capacity. There is excess capacity. Excess capacity is the reason why we have some of the debt that is piling up, because not only are we not even able to pay for the ones that have been produced, there is also some additional capacity that we've either told them not to start or not to produce at all, that they also submit invoice for us to pay. The sector we need to fix the collection as soon as possible. We need to ensure that if we can rely on an indigenous gas supply, it's always going to be cheaper for us to secure maybe gas contracts from neighboring countries aside of what we've already contracted, because in most cases it's cheaper than us trying to bring in the liquid fuel. Everybody knows that liquid fuels are expensive. That's how come in the projections that was done in the outlook, they weren't looking to bring in more than 400,000 barrels of HFO, and that was even only for AXA. So 2 months down the line, I think if we have only 2.5 days of supply, then the minister should stop giving excuses, because it's long enough for us to have the liquid fuel. I can understand if they didn't expect that the Atuabo plant is going to have a problem, so we haven't made provision for that. It does happen. It was happening previously because there's no cash to go and buy the liquid fuel, and everybody managing the sector would wish that there is always gas. But if there is no gas, they need to have strategic reserve that will take you not for 2 days, but at least for a month.
Let me ask, because you need to go, let me ask a final question here. And then we can also hear from the minority. They say that some big companies and state institutions are not paying their bills. The reason why ECG is unable to collect that much. And that for me is at the crust of the issue. I am on a prepaid meter, and I make sure that I even buy excess of what I need, because I don't want a situation where my light will go off in the middle of the night and I don't know what to do. So I always have excess amount of money on my prepaid. And some have suggested that the prepaid meter constitutes one major step to address these financial issues, with ECG. But here's the case: we have state-owned enterprises, ministries that are also not paying what they consume. Government says we'll bring in the private sector to undertake some operations of ECG. What, in your view, should be the way forward to make ECG more potent in delivering on its mandate?
For me, I believe that the managers of the distribution utility should be held more accountable than they are being held at the moment. And it is not just today. You recall the battle that the previous PRC board were having with the board of ECG.
Right.
The people at ECG, the top management let's face it, in any private business, if you are unable to collect more than a certain amount, there are key performance indicators that you give to the people. Let the person sign on to that and say, if I'm not able to deliver, I would allow myself to be fired. There are people who are taking their salary, full salary, bonuses and packages, but the system is not getting better. There's a problem with that. If the people don't feel that there's the employer, the person who appoints them is going to fire them when they do 60% collection, then there's very little incentive. But let me say this before I go off. You see, most of the time we push all the blame to the utilities. Okay, they have their own challenges, but we also have to be honest and help the system. You talked about prepaid meters. There are studies that show that the leakages that is going on, even with the prepayment, it's scary. Okay, so let's all come on board and help by, for example, if you know somebody, we have friends. You know people who are bypassing their meters. People know hotels who are stealing power. ECG cannot be everywhere at the same time.
That's true.
So they need a citizenry, and we all need to be good citizens. Obviously, technology will help. Prepaid metering will help. But the cost of one prepaid meter, it's so high. It's so high that they need money to bring in those meters as well. And when they are doing that, that is capital expenditure that PURC will have to add it to their tariff proposals and allow them to recover over a period of time. There are no free lunches here.
Right.
There are problems with the system, but we also need to help them. If you're on credit meters, go pay your bills. It's true that you might not receive your bill, but you know that if you use electricity, go pay your bill so that at least they have sufficient money to do that. But briefly, the reason why government is not able to hold the MMDAs to account is that you take the universities, for example. If you want them to all go prepaid metering, they need enough money to be able to be paying for the electricity. Meanwhile, the academic user fee that the universities are charging the people, there's a cap. Government says that you can't go beyond this amount. The reason why Kolebu can't pay its electricity bill is that if I take the true cost of keeping the electricity on and add it to the bill that patients are supposed to pay, that is when I'm able to collect enough and pay my electricity. So if I'm not collecting enough because government has imposed a cap on that, then all they do is that when they have the money, they use it to buy the essentials. And then they leave you to figure out where to get the money to pay for the utilities. So let's be honest with ourselves. If we want the MMDAs to be paying I'm not saying that they shouldn't pay the electricity. But sometimes the subvention that is given to them doesn't cover even their utilities. It will be interesting. That's how come if they go to prepaid metering, very soon you see that you go to an office, and not that they have squandered the money, but there's no money to pay for the payment. The energy sector is in serious crisis, and we all need to come on board. The government says it's bringing private sector on board. Let's interrogate the modalities they're going to use to engage the private sector, and then let's all help the sector to stand. Otherwise, we are going nowhere.
All right, Mr. Ishmael Ajekume, thank you so much for your perspective on this matter. He is a former board member of the PURC, and that's his perspective of this particular matter. Now, the crisis is quite deep, and people are preferring some solutions to this. Let's listen to George Kwame Abuaju, who is a ranking member on the Energy Committee, and he's of the view that state institutions are also not paying their bills, the reason why ECG collection is very low.
Most of our companies in this country, a lot of them, they don't pay electricity bills. A lot don't pay. And transmission losses also is another factor, which the minister has to look at it. We are currently at around 29 to 30% transmission losses, whereby the OECD or the international sectors, their transmission losses is around 8 to 9%. So if we are able to overcome these transition losses, also it's part of money. Because at generation, when you generate power, okay, immediately you generate, the generator charges what he has generated. So whether you use it or not, whether it goes to the consumer or not, definitely they are going to charge us. So this is some of the areas I would like the minister to look at it. Because transmission losses is killing us. I always said, our tariff is when you compare to the West African sector tariff, I think we are almost at par with them. But if we are at par with them and still having all these challenges, what do you have to say? So these two critical sectors, critical areas, like the transmission losses and people who are not paying, big industries, because very few are paying electricity bills in this country. So, Mr. Minister, you have our support. We will not antagonize what you want to do for the country. We all want the best. You've been a ranking member before, and we'll collaborate with the chairman and the rest of the committee to do what is right for this country.
Right, so that's the MPP side on the Mines and Energy Committee of Parliament, and that's the ranking member there. Now, some of you have also been sharing your views on this particular matter. We've got 2 days to buy food, otherwise you are likely to have Dumsor in your home. Then Crystal says a black country called Ghana that produces oil is looking for money to buy oil from the white man, so the white man's machines can give the black country called Ghana electricity. Again, we've got Yao February says the NDC government told we Ghanaians that the MPP government left only 2 weeks of fuel back then before leaving the governance of this country. So we should direct the Dumsor on them. Almost 5 months on, the power minister comes out to say that the outfit is left with just 3 days. So what really is going on? The revelation is telling us that the MPP government did well in managing the energy sector. Bernard says, what is entirely true, you were mute during the whole 8 years of the MPP administration. So electricity is key for everybody, and that's the reason why we are spending some time on this particular matter. Let's